Do-do-do-do-do-do.
Was that the intro music? I'm kind of
That
into
is
it.
now our intro
That's,
music.
I mean, that's the intro music to Cowboy Bebop, but
What was the song we used to play? I suppose we should pay attention to what we're doing now.
Welcome again.
Yeah, welcome back. Hopefully,
Saturday night.
and we could be out partying and all that stuff that young people are doing,
Smoking
or
cigarettes.
smoking cigarettes, doing the weeds, and whatever else. Drugs are bad,
Being
kids.
being on the pot.
I can't even say that stuff with a straight face, but
Same.
no, instead
hmm
we, and if you can hear this, you are spending your Saturday night in, and that's exciting. That's great.
Hey, I'm showing up on the stream as something from the regular Discord chat.
You are fixed.
There we go.
Good thing you noticed that I was staring right at it on my screen, just like that doesn't look right. I'm just gonna let it go. Like, no, fix it. Okay. So, as you can see, where we have episode 3 at the bottom here, we're going to be doing the top 10 SNES games as determined by us. It was a long and arduous process that ended with a gladiatorial battle on top of the Empire State Building, but it got done. Just some things I want to mention. Let me get my notes. Let me get my cue cards. First of all, most important, audio issues have been a thing for us, unfortunately. Is my
That is
is my
true.
fan coming through? Speaking of audio
No,
issues.
I don't hear it. I don't know
Okay.
if anyone else does. If any of the two, we were a far cry from last week's 20 something.
Oh, it's on its. People filter in, come hang
The
out.
night is but a zygote.
takes a
Uh,
few minutes.
so there have been some audio issues thus far. We were
Sound
made
level,
aware
basically.
by someone who went back to watch the clips of last week's episode, and our voice audio was low,
And
which
the
meant when there were
the the
advertisements, as it were, they'd
was
go
enough to
your
it'll literally give someone a heart attack. They had to
uh,
turn our stream up so they could hear it, and then the ads hit like an old Memorex commercial. It like blasted them out of their chair.
there. I remember when there were TVs that had a feature. God, this fan's almost too much. Got traded in the 18-incher for a 20-incher. Uh, so there used to be ads for TVs where that was a selling point, like
Yep.
voice or some kind of actuation for sound, so that commercials won't deafen you because people would do that, especially like your crazy Bruce and his liquors and all that
Oh my
shit.
god.
With just some fucking cartoon character comes on screen and starts screaming at you. Like you just finish a tense moment in The Sopranos, and you're like, oh my god, what's gonna happen next? And then some douchebag from like Bristol, Connecticut, is just screaming in your ear, waking up your wife, just being a bitch. So apparently that's a threat now. You need to please let us know if that's still happening, and I'll see what I can do. I turned our audio up about 15 odd decibels. Hopefully that kind of equalizes things a bit. And we're also going to talk a little bit before we get started on the topic at hand about our new schedule. We've sort of landed on Saturday being what is this show is effectively a podcast, and then on Wednesday we're going to try to correctly play video games and not have a shit show like we did this week. That was sort of a last minute idea, and it didn't go well. So we ended up making it fun, which was cool, but it was
It
a
was a
mess.
blind playthrough, blind to the point where we didn't even, check to see the game's basic functionality.
I mean, it
And the
works
game
in
is
single
so
player.
old. Yeah, it works in single player, but multiplayer is a shit show.
I ended up shutting down my entire PC, so that was awesome. We were really off to the races. Um, so we had a long talk today about with ease.
These
We had a long talk today about kind of stuff we're going to be talking about on the channel, and we ended up landing on top 10 lists is a very appealing format, and I know it's overdone. We're aware of that, but the truth is, it lends itself really well to conversations, the tangents and stuff like that. Cool stories because it's coming from three guys. Each of us has like a unique relationship with these games. And looking at my list, there are 10 on the top 10, quite obviously, and probably another 20 on the honorable mentions. So we have plenty to talk about, and we'll be listening.
Reason,
I have
another
stream
reason
chat.
it's good is, yep, there's stream chat.
I have.
Um,
I was just gonna say I have stream chat pulled up, so audience interaction is encouraged.
Keeps us focused because we're essentially, we're gamer nerds, effectively at a diner, talking like we would at a diner, drinking coffee, smoking cigarettes, if that's what day and age it is again. But like, we'll ramble for hours, so we kind of defined a decent topic, that we could all jump into and talk about, and so it keeps us constrained to our top 10, and then once that's done, once that core is done, we can ramble, we can do everything.
It's overdone, but there's a reason it's overdone. Like,
It worked for Letterman for how long?
Still, are they still doing that?
Still, top 10s.
I
Top
don't know.
10s are fun. Anyways,
They are fun. If you have a problem with that, you can suck it. I mean, oh, right. Uh, Another reason. Oh, not Letterman. I mean, are they still doing Are they still doing top tens on whatever show he was on? I wasn't sure. I haven't watched late night TV in ever.
yeah,
Oh, Letterman. Yeah, I saw him too. He's been doing a show on Netflix,
that's
inter
what it was.
interviewing celebrities and
Yeah,
having like these frank talks with them. Pretty good show. I can't really promote it because I don't remember what it's called, but just David Letterman talks to Jay-Z and Robert Downey Jr. I think. Yeah, I'm with you, man. I never got into that late night TV stuff. It's just like I'm trying to fall asleep and you got Jay Leno screaming trying to keep me awake and I'm like, "Oh God, stop." Uh all right. So another thing about top tens is we think it really works as a way to get our collective brains in on it. So it's a list that represents us, not just like three things from me, three things from Brian, and three things from Steve. And it's kind of like it makes us collaborate on it, and I think it's going to be better for viewing and talking too because of that. So
yeah,
uh, I said something yesterday. What were we playing? We were playing Final Fantasy, I think, yesterday.
yeah. You said such destruction was not my intention.
Oh, such just that's one of the best lines allegedly in Final Fantasy 14 right now. Such devastation was not my intention. And that reminded me of a quick story I wanted to tell on stream because we were
Story time.
reminiscing. We were reminiscing last night. We reminisced till 3. It was
If we could do like a dark show, like an after hour show, would be great. But that's just us raw talking, and it's
it,
senseless hours of babbling about nothing.
it's just a
There's
series of in
humor for us,
jokes.
but no content. Like,
Not only is it just a series of in jokes, but it would be it would implicate a lot of people. Like people who it would involve personal details about people we're not gonna put out there. So that sort of stuff is generally just off limits. Uh, what we what a story I wanted to tell quick just to warm everybody up was I'm calling it the Smokin' Cafe wheelchair story.
which is
Now,
Smoking Cafe. If you're local to
go ahead.
Connecticut, it's now called the Cosmic Omelet. Back in the day, that was like an awesome hangout spot. It was a smoking cafe. They had coffee, some pastries and breads, some food like sandwiches, and but you could hang out and smoke in there. And we used to game somewhere in there. So
Yeah, that was pretty much like one of our stomping grounds, and it was like home. You go in there, they had like a living room where you could sit on the
mm,
couches and watch movies and TV, and get like a
very
burger or
comfy.
something from the counter, and some Hosmer Mountain soda or something, and it was a nice place to be. if you
On your
didn't
birthday,
mind.
you got free coffee all day.
Did you?
Yes,
You
you
know what's
did. That
funny? I
was
never drank coffee
amazing.
until after those days, so
Oh,
I missed out. But especially
You
because it was
know,
probably really shitty diner coffee, and like I'm here for that.
people still game there at the Cosmic Omelet. They
I
still
believe
rent out
that.
the back room.
Tracy's old school.
holy, holy shit! I gotta stop in there.
So, to tell the quick wheelchair story, let me set the scene.
Context.
There was always a group of older folks, retirees probably, who would play cribbage at one of the tables, pretty
Holy
much right
shit, dude.
inside the door near the entrance. Our group would always congregate in the back, where the living room area was. If you walked in, it was straight back and to the left. Now, our friend Jeff is paraplegic, and he's been that way his whole life. So it was nice for him to be able to get out of his chair and get into the big recliner. And I would just clown around all the time. I'd grab his wheelchair and wheel around and do wheelies and all kinds of shenanigans. So we ordered a whole bunch of food, and we were going to sit down and watch a movie, but I could never keep my hands still, as you can probably tell. Um,
When we travel to like Pennsylvania, we scare people with how much we talk with our
oh,
hands.
that's true. That's a
That's
whole
another
other
story.
story. But
You guys aren't even Italian.
you guys are gesticulating so wildly. But anyway, so we had ordered a bunch of food. We are gonna sit down and watch a movie, and I'm in Jeff's wheelchair, just doing some stunt 101 shit, just to like, just fucking popping wheelies, getting one wheel spinning one way, the other way, and just having a good time and seeing how high I can get the thing. And I wanted to see how high I could fly, and it turns out I discovered my limits. I tipped the wheelchair up, and it was too far. I lost it. I started to fall backwards. So what do? You reach for something to stop your fall. What did I reach for? The white plastic like lawn tables they had. They had us put all our food on, like the end table on the end of the chair. So I reached for that, put my hand on it, and the table just collapsed. The table collapsed and it yeeted the food like a catapult. It just I like as I'm falling, I just watched a hot dog pass over me like in slow motion, like I'm doing Hans Gruber, and there's just a hot dog, just just flying wiener, and I hit the deck. So I wrecked two people's meals. I fell. I really clobbered myself on the cement floor, and I started laughing about it. It was funny. It was just like, oh no, I gotta buy Jeff a new hot dog. But it was funny. That I thought it was funny. I'm getting up. I'm like, oh, that sucks. And I'm dusting myself off. And I realize at that moment that the elderly people are running to help the poor kid in a wheelchair who fell out of his chair. So there's this really odd moment where I stand up, like deer in the headlights. And they're looking at me shocked and so angry. And I just said, it's a miracle. They did not believe me. So that was my embarrassing story about such destruction was not my intention. Now that I've wasted a solid 10 minutes of your time.
On with the top 10? On with the core?
On with the top. That's on my notes. Smoking Cafe wheelchair story. I had to tell it.
It,
So
it was, it was, and Flying Wiener is the name of this episode.
Yes. So
Were you hooning in that wheelchair? 'Cause you were operating a vehicle with the intent to like draw a reaction. No, you were just sitting in it idly, just kind of.
no, I was kind of doing wheelchair like wheelies, but just because I was bored, just being
Okay.
restless, just like. I mean, the thing has wheels. How am I not gonna do that, right? Like, do wheelies. It has wheels. Obviously, you should put
I don't
as
remember
many of those
Jeff's
wheels in the
reaction.
air as possible. What's that?
I don't remember Jeff's reaction. I think he
I
was
think he
upset that
called
you
me an
took the
idiot,
food.
which
Yeah,
was
I think
fair.
so. Yeah.
That's fair enough. Um, okay. We're gonna go down a rabbit hole here of chat. We have our top 10, and it's gonna be contentious. Some of you might agree wholeheartedly. Others might say these guys are high on drugs. This list sucks butts. It is
Such
lacking the immortal or whatever. Like, that's a horrible, horrible game. I'm not even sure they had it on the SNES, but
so
starting at
we
number 10.
so the way we got this
Go
list,
ahead, go ahead.
we sat around, we made our own individual lists, we compared lists, and we had a discussion and the fight on the top of the Empire State Building. We missed the Zeppelin docking by about 90 minutes. So next time we have one, we'll get there 90 minutes earlier. We can fight on top of the Zeppelin as it goes to Lakehurst. M&M's,
Sponsored by.
not
No, it's
sponsored by.
not. It's not.
Um, but anyways, we discussed the list. We added things, we removed things. And so basically the top 10 is stuff that all of us from our various lists um uh played and loved uh or experienced. There's like two games on the list where I didn't play because they were the type of games where I just love to watch people play them. Um, so, but I got the experience of them multiple nights at friends' houses, just watching them play and kind of playing along, reading through the strat guide or checking the map. Anyway, um, on with the show.
Okay, so number 10. This is one I didn't play, so I just had to read about it. And these guys, the other two guys, are like, this game's awesome. And I was like, dude, I'm gonna talk on camera tonight with a bunch of M&Ms in my mouth. So number 10 is ActRaiser, the first one. Why don't you guys who actually played it talk about it?
ActRaiser, it blended a strat game and a side scroller beat 'em up. Um, and Steve had the best synopsis of it when I was trying to like get
You
words to form in my mouth hole that I
It
couldn't
was
do.
a city building simulator where you played literally God, and everyone would come and pray to you for what they needed, and you'd build your town. And then monsters would threaten it, and you'd be like, "Motherfucker, no!" And you'd go and you kick the shit out of them and save your village, and it was
In
great.
like a side scroll, like
Scrolling,
Ghosts and
yeah,
Goblins or Knights of the Round style side scroller. It was a lot of
hmm
fun.
yeah. It was actually really disappointing in the second one when they took out all of the city building and sim aspect of
Can
it.
we ban Ironheart gamers? That guy's acting stupid.
Yeah.
Mouth.
Ow.
Yeah, I mean, I,
Um,
Um,
I think I rented ActRaiser if I'm being honest, because that you don't forget that weird like overhead view, and then you're
the
in a
weird blend.
side-scrolling action stage. Like that's very distinct, and it's ringing a bell. But I certainly didn't play it much, and I think it was revolutionary in its own way for kind of blending genres. Very few games had done that before. I played one similar, an action RPG called Spellcaster on Sega Master System, and it was another game like that where it was like a Myst style RPG, like go north, go south, and then you'd have a little panel that was what you could see, and then it would you do side-scrolling sections, and then at the end of the game, you actually it turned into your character. I don't know what the hell nonsense he did, but he found his powers, which means in JRPGs he got wings, and it just became like a Galaga style shooter. So I was like, dude, this is like three kinds of games. That's pretty wild. But ActRaiser, I think, did it better, and
yeah, the
has
two different parts of the game would interplay, and like you when you go into the beat 'em up stages, the power ups and items you had to start were based on how well you did in the simulation section and what you had found and acquired.
Very neat.
All right, moving on. Number
Very very
nine,
good concept.
and I'm telling you guys, we debated this for quite a while. Once we narrowed down a top 10, getting them in order was just as difficult, if not more
Justice.
so. So number nine, we ended up picking Star Fox, the original one, for a few reasons. It was way ahead of its time. You can go look at that game now, and it looks horrible. Like the polygons are the size of a
Buildings,
dime.
because they were. Oh,
Yeah. Well, like, but that was when polygons became a thing. That was the first time, as far as I know, that a 16-bit console was using polygons to make 3D shapes, which gave this world some depth, and it was interesting. And Slippy Frog would just die a lot, and that was kind of funny. And
Help me, Frog. Help me, Fox. Help me, Fox.
yeah, that was one of my nominations. Because like I even at the young age, I was following all the any tech data I could get on the Super FX chip. I would read and try to understand. I'd often have to get like other magazines, just to understand some of the tech behind it. But it was their Polygon renderer coprocessor, and it was designed. Honestly, it was like uh, I think it was like a mini graphics accelerator or like an early version of it. So Slippy beats with a stick.
I mean, I didn't have a personal connection to the game. I sucked at it. Like I
I did
usually
too. I
fought
never
these
beat it.
bosses, and I could never figure out what actually I'm supposed to do. Like there's some flashy shit I'm probably supposed to shoot, but he's about to hit me with another round polygon set, and I don't know what that is. And uh, yeah, no, it
Bro
was.
falls,
Oh God, bro fails. It's more like it.
bitcoins.
Yeah, they're welcome for the free exposure to their Bitcoin mining service.
So I dug a little bit on that game that we played the other night, Bro Falls. The developer and publisher, they have no business page. They have a Twitter account and a Facebook account. That is it. That's why it was suspect in my head.
Yeah,
Like,
it's super suspect. Number 8, another one, like 3 in a row that I would never spend a lot of time on myself, but good cases were made. Number 8, we have Super Metroid, which, as most folks know, was just like regular Metroid, but super.
Yeah. The only reason it didn't end up higher on the list was because it was just Metroid again. Much better. Yeah. Much better done. Everything about the game was an improvement over the original, but there was nothing really new about it. But it's still a genre-defining game to this day.
As one half of the eponymous Metroidvania.
Mm-hmm.
Number 7, this is where things start to get more interesting. Number 7, we have The Legend of Zelda: Link to the Past. In my mind, I wanted to put this higher because I remember it felt like magic when I first played it. Uh, it but we kind of felt the same way about this that we did about Metroid. It was it was amazing. The game was incredible. One of the best on the system. But it didn't feel like it invented something. It didn't feel impactful. It felt like you took the game, Zelda, the first Zelda game on the NES, and just made it better. I mean, it's an excellent game, absolutely top tier. It just, I'm, I might play it next week. Like, I haven't played it in 15 years.
And that's true Doom. Like almost all the Zelda games are quality. And whenever you look at the lists of best Zelda games, I think the determining factor is almost always which one was someone's first. And A Link to the Past and Ocarina of Time always battle it out for the best Zelda game, and it's always between people for whom Ocarina was their first or let yeah, A Link to the Past was.
Yeah, that's kind of a generational thing. Like for me, it
Yeah.
was the original Zelda, and I remember
Yeah,
walking into the
same.
cave, and I was like, "What is this?" And then going to get the Master Sword in the graveyard, I'm like, "Ah, there's so many skeletons."
Or after beating the game and you found out that you could just start a new game with the name Zelda and it would be an
Yeah.
entirely different game that was 10 times harder.
Yep.
fucking second quest,
Yeah.
mind blowing.
I mean, that's
Holding that reset button while you power off. That should be our exit line when the show's done.
oh,
Holding
that's
that
not a bad
reset button
idea.
while you power off. Like,
So we deliberately added some curveballs. We had the 10, but we didn't want the top 10 to be dominated by a particular genre. So we ended up mixing in some oddballs here that might surprise some folks, which will be fun. Surprises are fun. Everybody likes being surprised. Uh, so at number 6, we have a game called Flashback. And I'm not sure how many folks are going to remember that one. Um, oh, yeah, no, isn't it? That's the goal. It's I just let COVID determine the fact that it's time to grow my hair out for once, the one time it's
I
ever
should
gonna
have done. I'm
happen.
kicking myself for not capitalizing on that. Nobody would have faulted me for growing my long hair again. And like, they're like, yeah, you couldn't get outside. But like, nope, cut it at home or went out to get it cut. I should have taken the year and changed and I could have my hair back in much better health than it was in my youth.
So Brian, you actually had some insight on Flashback and what made it so special.
Flashback was, um, just the animation style was super fluid. Um, as far as I could tell in my research, it was developed by one guy. He programmed it, wrote it, and then I think they later opened a studio. It was a French programmer, but anyways, it was super good. It was a side-scrolling platformer, uh, semi-adventure because you had to like find, you had to find things to unlock and like backtrack through the various levels to unlock the next zone. And there were like, I
Kind
think
of a
like pro.
genre, kind of a genre like spiritual successor to things like Prince of Persia.
Yes, very much so. And there were also like proto quick time events. Like I remember at least like one scene, maybe it was Out of This World, which was the prequel or the first game in the series. Maybe it was a second. Anyways, where like you would load into a screen and there was like this big mechanized tank and you had to do something before it shot you and it would shoot you in like anywhere from 5 to 10 seconds. Um, and so you just kind of had to figure it out. Um, it wasn't QuickTime where it's like mash X, but like you had to use an item with or activate something in the background scenery to like short out the tank to let you run past it. Pretty interesting.
That's more like Sierra Adventure game style
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah. But yeah, it did. It mixed like Prince of Persia with some adventure game. Honestly, the smooth animation on it was what really got me. Like your guy's legs would move like just a tiny bit if you just nudged him a little bit. Like all of it was very cool. It didn't need high fidelity graphics just because of what it was going for. It was, it's a lot like watching a comic book, like play a comic book or something like that.
And that's one of those things that going back and playing old games for the first time you tend to miss, like
Hmm.
because those things like the legs being completely animated and not just a couple of frames is something that's just normal now, and you don't notice it as new or interesting when you go back and play an older game.
I have a clip here I might throw on in a second. Oh God, it does look dated, but like I'm remembering when it was new. Anybody familiar with Out of This World? You will recognize the animation style, but this made better use of the 16-bit console's capabilities. I'm trying to find this particular section here. Oh, is he dying? I can never tell. Oh, he has an anti-G system. I don't need the audio. Fuck. I can only show it like I'm just gonna show a moment of a clip here. Brian, I gotta cover your face. That's just the only way I can do this right now. Like
Oh, that animation right there is so good.
it
Like your
was it
guy,
was
like
unheard of, right? Like
yeah.
um, just trying to find where the stupid thing is. I gotta shrink the window. Just watch the see the way he turned around and it was fully animated.
Yeah.
He hit the ground and like stumbled. Stuff like this was not done. It just wasn't done.
Interesting. There's a game I played on Commodore 64 called Impossible Mission, and the animation was very similar to that. Your guy would do like flips and stuff like that, and it was super smooth.
So that was a special game. Yeah, no. Blackthorn is another honorable mention. It's on my list for honorable mention because I think Blackthorn came slightly after Flashback, but it was
Yeah,
obviously inspired by that and Out of This World, and it was awesome. They had more combat. It was more fun
hey Muppet.
in a visceral sense, and it was badass. I mean, you were a tall Peter Steele looking dude with pump action, and I mean, I had a great time with that game. I remember Blackthorn very clearly. The only reason we chose Flashback is because it had a lot of like RPG sort of elements. Like you can, there was a story, and somebody made a comparison to the Sierra games that we've talked about a ton of times, and it's accurate. Like you had to acquire items and take them to the right place and survive the action sequences and stuff like that. So it was ahead of its time. I guess you could credit Out of This World the same way, but I think Flashback was such an improvement in the play experience that it deserved
Yeah,
its own mention. All right, number 5. This is where it gets juicy and greasy at the same time. And
Groovy,
greasy.
greasy.
At number 5, we have what will be number 1 for probably a lot of people. At number 5, we have Chrono Trigger. And I can't tell you exactly why it's at number 5 because, again, we
Were
didn't want
better
the list.
games.
Well,
Spoilers.
yes, that's a good point. But
It's hard to say, but there's better games. Like,
Chrono Trigger was exceptional. It's one of the best RPGs of all time. I just don't think, outside of a couple of niche features like the combo attacks and stuff like that, I don't think it brought anything to the table that Square wasn't already covering with another franchise that I have a suspicion we're going to talk about. Uh,
The multiple endings were really neat, but they were just icing on the cake. None of them really affected gameplay other than just playing what if with time, which was cool, but it was an additional feature, not something that was really core to the game.
so Chrono Trigger is an exceptional game, and I don't want to give anybody the idea that we're kind of like snubbing it, putting it that low. It's just it didn't feel revolutionary enough. It was like by that time Square had established that they could make a great role-playing game. And when they made Chrono Trigger, they made another great role-playing game. But I mean, for us, we just thought the story wasn't quite as strong as other alternatives. We thought where it gained ground, it lost it in other areas.
And let's be honest, top 10 NES Legends could easily just be top 10 SNES RPG Legends, and the
yeah,
list wouldn't be any different.
and nobody
The
would
SNES,
debate any of it. Like, yeah,
the Super Nintendo absolutely dominated the RPG
yeah,
genre at the time.
yep.
Um,
Shout out Shining Force on
Oh
Genesis
my
though.
God,
yeah,
yes.
So number 4, we have kind of a curveball here. I think this will be no number 3 will be surprising too. But number 4 we chose Rock and Roll Racing. There were a lot of fun
Eight.
driving games on the SNES. None of them were anywhere near the pure unadulterated fun that Rock and Roll Racing would bring, especially because you could play split screen and fuck your friends up with rockets
The
and
soundtrack, still hear the soundtrack in my head. It was all licensed music done in like MIDI format. Steppenwolf, George Thorogood,
Black fucking
Yeah,
Sabbath.
Black Sabbath. And it was all in MIDI files, like MIDI sound format, and I can still hear it to this day where like that sounds more natural than when I hear like Paranoid, like on the radio or on Spotify. My brain goes back to the like really bad quality, like dee 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 dee, and like no, that's that song to me. But yeah, I found that game and I loved RC Pro Am on the NES, and then I had rented Rock and Roll Racing. I'm like, oh, it looks like RC Pro Am. Hooked, and then I think I bought it like, or I got it as a gift or something. But that game kept me hooked for so long. And like back in the day when I had first met Mikey, it had come up in conversation at some point. Like maybe it was a year or two after I met him, but like it came up in convo in the past, like a long time ago. And like I remembered that ever since because I'm like, I played this game, it was like Rock and Roll Racing, and he was like, dude, that was so good. And like, so I didn't think anybody else really had the same passion for that game as I did. Um, and like as far as racing games go, we all know F-Zero on the Super NES is, you know, that's what it's known for. But like while I played a lot of F-Zero, I was pretty much addicted to Rock and Roll Racing. Just upgrades, racetracks, nice top-down view like RC Pro Am, very smooth controls driving, and even had things where you could like jump parts of the corners in the track. Um, Rock and Roll Racing was Codemasters? Oh, Micro Machines.
Yeah, there's some weird history with that Micro Machines game.
So
That
Codemasters went from Micro Machines to Operation Flashpoint. There's something to sink your teeth into. Not directly, they had an interim, but like they did Micro Machines. They also did Operation Flashpoint. One of the like it almost started the modern military sim on PC. Um, we digress. What's next on the list?
we're getting into the top three. This is where it got
Enter.
really
That's
tough.
right.
Uh,
That's
and I'm
right. Yeah,
gonna let
Codemasters heavily leaned into racing. Sorry.
no, you're fine. You're fine. I'm gonna let Steve and Brian handle this one mostly. I had a full experience with it. I finished the game at one point, which was super hard, and but I think they could describe what was special about it better. And for number three, we have Shadowrun on the SNES, specifically the SNES version, because no other console got the same version, as
Right.
far as we know.
Genesis had a version, but it wasn't as good. Or actually, was it on the
What?
Genesis first?
The Genesis
It was an action
Shadowrun
game.
game was a
Yeah.
completely different game.
They
Hmm.
just used
Eh,
like the same box art and tricked people.
They had the same. I don't know if they had the same box art, but I mean, other than it being a Shadowrun game set in the
Yeah.
Shadowrun universe and being licensed, there is literally nothing in common between the two games. They're both pretty good. I think the SNES version is better,
Yeah.
but
That was my first
uh,
real foray into. I'll just give a couple quick sentences and pitch it to Steve. That was my first foray into like really cyberpunk, uh, cyberpunk magic, firearms, all things that from like various RPGs, kind of thrown into one. I was like, this is crazy. And that, I played the hell out of that game and then eventually got into the Shadowrun tabletop. And I'm like, oh, I played the video game that this is based on. And then no, no, no. The tabletop's been around much longer and the video game was from this. Okay, here we go. Head first. Loved Shadowrun, ended up falling in love with Cyberpunk 2020, Cyberpunk 2017 in high school, and it went from there. That's pretty much one of my number two like tabletop RPG of all time, Cyberpunk 2020. On to Steve. Your
yeah,
thoughts on
Cyber
Shadow?
Shadowrun got well. One, it got me into the isometric RPGs. It was my first one, uh, which I've been playing forever now since then.
Yep.
But I mean, got me into cyberpunk and the Shadowrun genre. Uh, I mean, just at that age, the idea of all fantasy was medieval fantasy,
Yep.
and just the base idea of having a futuristic world with cybernetics and shotguns and uh,
Crazy.
computers, and then orcs and goblins and trolls. It was just so creative and weird that it just pulled in my imagination at the time. Like just getting off a subway and throwing fireballs at people, like which
It was
happens at one point in the game.
that's a good point because it was the first time you ever got both. You're like, I'm gonna throw a grenade, and my mage is gonna throw a fireball. Like your Sam throws a grenade, your street mage casts a fireball, and it's like those were like those did not mix as far as like RPG in that era. Like to
I
my
mean,
knowledge, they didn't mix, and then they did, and that was super crazy.
the modern Shadowrun revival games are still they're some of my favorite
Very
games.
good. You can find them
Uh,
on Steam and good old games, but like
uh,
Shadowrun Returns, amazing. I
Shadowrun Returns, Dragonfall,
yeah,
and what was the third one?
Tokyo,
It,
Neo
it took it took
Tokyo.
it took place in China, but I can't remember the name of
Yeah,
it. Now I gotta look. But yeah, some of the best games I've ever played. I still go back down. It's just Shadowrun Hong Kong. Doesn't
Shadowrun
have an
Hong
interest.
Kong.
Uh, I still go back and play them occasionally, both the
Yep.
SNES and the Genesis one. Yeah.
Next on the list.
The top two.
One last thing,
Oh yeah,
the darkness and the concept that you had a cortex bomb in your head that had been
yeah.
planted was
That's
just what the fuck. Somebody
that's
literally installed a bomb in your brain to go off
if
if
that's
you
not
didn't do what they
motivation to go on an adventure, I don't know what is.
Why are we doing this? Because we want to save the world and we're heroes. Why are we doing this? Because there's a bomb in my head.
Okay,
Uh, well,
let's do what they say because we don't know who can detonate that. Yeah. And that's a trope of cyberpunk is like a corny cranial bomb or just anything like that.
Mm.
When I ran my 2020, somebody had actually player character sold out to a mega corporation. He had a bomb in his head, and like he decided to step out of line, and I blew his head up. No remorse. Turned to the next player. It's like, all right, what are you doing? I'm like, oh, I get
I
away from
remember
him.
that, and
Great.
there was. I mean, Shadowrun brought me to your tabletop, that
Yeah.
cyberpunk tabletop. But I remember there was a character. There was the other character who didn't want to listen, and he was
Yep.
like, "You have to obey everybody. You have to obey everybody on the team who's higher ranked than you." And then he was beating up one of this trash can robot that they had,
Yep.
and people were trying to stop him, and they were like, "I'll beat up the trash can. I'll beat him up if I want to." I'm like, "You will," like that's
That
Sergeant Trash Can to you.
Sergeant Trash Can. He outranks you, and then he
You.
couldn't beat him up anymore. There was a lot of like actual like mental programming in some of these characters, just because things they had been through and like uh, that I could go on for entire
Didn't he
streams
end up in the
about.
desert? Didn't he end up in the desert
Yes,
digging dishes while Captain Trash Can gave him
supervised
orders?
him. Yep.
Supervised him because he got promotions.
Like I was a semi-vicious Cyberpunk 2020 GM, but my players were vicious to each other on their own, and like
Yeah.
it's the dark future. Uh, top two.
Yeah. Just that was
Mm,
not something I wanted to interrupt.
I want to amend that.
80s
I
and
was a vicious Cyberpunk GM. I still am a vicious Cyberpunk GM. I am not done running Cyberpunk in any way, shape, or form. I'll be running Red at some time.
but you have a genre that's basically peak 80s and then viciously capitalism anti-capitalist critique. And how could I not fall in love with that?
Yeah. Yeah, you got a cat on your head, or is that behind you? Oh, it's
Mind
not a
you, it
cat.
just looks like it. Is that Grover?
Oh, it is a cat.
It's Grover.
The one who groves.
Say hi, Grover.
All
My
right,
pants
we
fell
just
down, by the way, on my way back over to the desk.
you're all right.
Yeah, no, I was hoping
Your
so.
cameo appearance.
These
Mm.
these PJs are stretched the fuck out. All right,
Yo,
back on
Twilight
topic.
2000.
Back on topic. Number two, it's a tough one for me personally. But number two is, I mean, I'm gonna call it Final Fantasy 3 because that was the box I purchased. I know it's 6. We all know it's Final Fantasy 6, and that's, in my opinion, the best game in that franchise. Um, it's not even close. 7 was good, doesn't hold a candle for me. The soundtrack for the SNES was unbelievable, unbelievable. It's won awards. The composer is a legend. What they were able to do with MIDI files was just ridiculous. The
Yeah.
character development, ridiculous. Like you really cared about those characters, and the bad guy won. How often does that
Serious,
happen?
serious Empire Strikes Back kind of, you leaving off on a not so awesome note.
Like halfway through the game, the bad guys are trying to blow up the world. They blow up the world.
Like, oh shit.
Bajillions of people die. You lose, and then you spend the second half of the game picking up the pieces. It's it's insanely good. If you've never played that game through, get the one on Steam and play through it. It has a couple extra features, and the graphics are a little better, but
They just came out with the Pixel remasters, which I've read good things about so far.
I
There's
know
12
Steve. Sorry, Steve.
there's 12 billion different ports of
Yeah.
the early Final Fantasy games. Most of them are not great compared to the original. I've heard the Pixel remasters are actually pretty good.
I know Steve's got a lot of input for Final Fantasy 3-6. Mine, I never played it or owned it, but earlier I was like, when I said I experienced some of these games just at friends' houses on weekends and like watching them play. 3-6 was one of mine. I would watch my buddy play that constantly, and I was just like, it was an RPG. I was involved in it, even though I'm just watching it. And the Final Fantasy series continues to be one of those games that like I can watch be played and get a lot of enjoyment out of it, even though I'm not, mashing on the controller, typing on the keyboard. It's always fun to watch be played.
little known fact: Final Fantasy 2/4 also had multiplayer, but it wasn't as
Also available
strict.
on Steam.
It wasn't as strict. We just discovered accidentally that both controllers worked. So
Oh,
we would assign, like my brother would play with me. He would take Broza and Rydia, and I would take the three in the front. And like,
Rydia was the summoner, wasn't she?
yes,
I
yes,
thought that was the coolest shit ever. I was like,
it was
whoa, she can
cool.
just
The
like summon in other things. Like,
Square has been making excellent RPGs for as long as some people in our WoW guild have been alive.
yeah.
Like, it's
For
just
many,
it's their thing.
longer.
It's what they do best, which is why it's so surprising that number one is an RPG that isn't from Squaresoft. Can
Let's
anyone?
hang on. I was gonna say, let's take a minute, take a
Yeah.
second, and have people post their thoughts as to what do you think number one will be?
You know,
Yo, RPG,
I can't actually. I will say it's not Super Mario RPG, but
Mortal Kombat 2,
it's an excellent game.
Dragon Quest. Ooh, like
Mario
Dragon.
RPG
Dra-
is
uh,
lit.
Dragon Quest is another top contender, but we didn't really get any of the Super Nintendo ones in the United States. We
That's
got them
true.
later.
Yeah.
All right. Without further ado, we're gonna throw this at you. In
MKO
our
Mortal
opinion,
Kombat 2.
the best Super Nintendo game
It's a good one.
is covering
Ear-
Brian's face right now.
Earthbound.
Also known as Mother that might have been Mother 2 in Japan. That game defies definition. It's all the things they said about Shadowrun, where it was a modern RPG. Earthbound did, but it was quirky, it was weird, it was off kilter. The enemies were just funky and strange, and the story
So is
was
the
nuts.
so is the music.
Oh, the music is incredible. The whole experience is it's otherworldly. Uh, I
Even and
don't. Go ahead.
it's not like a typical Final Fantasy. You play a group of like adventurers. You're adolescents in Earthbound, and you're playing, like Steve had mentioned this when we were talking about it. You play on Earth. You play modern times. What was modern when it came out. Um, So, and to me, that showed, to retrospect me, young me was just like, oh, so much to do. In retrospect, that shows me like, so long as, I mean, you can write a good game in any setting or a good story in any setting. You don't need elves, you don't need magic or firearms or whatever. Um, you know, but like a modern city setting as adolescents, and I mean, the graphics were great. They lent themselves to it very well. Everybody was like a big head, a tiny body, like chibi almost. But yeah, it was neat because it showed me that I don't need to, or you don't need to have a fantasy setting or a sci-fi setting to have a good story, have a good party, good group, things like that.
Yeah. I mean, when you died, you'd wake up at the hospital and not some magic resurrection point. You took a taxi to get to different places. You had to call home and call your mom every once in a while and check in,
So if you
or
think about it,
or
it's
you
a
would get
mix.
homesick.
It's a mix of like Final Fantasy 1 and GTA 5. You know, you get killed in GTA 5, you go to the hospital, you get out,
You
you
wander
call
around
Lester,
town
you get
beating
a
up
new car. Great Odin's
you
Raven. I
you
think,
wander around town beating up people with a baseball bat and both.
see, the past is prologue. Is that our subscriber gift? Because I think part of it's being covered up or something.
Yeah, I noticed that. I'm not sure.
Mhm.
Well, Chop play with it after. That was Mike's up. There's a local boy plays WoW with us. Thanks, other Big Mike. Like the fifth in the channel right now, probably. So Earthbound was without peer. I never beat it. Full disclosure.
Neither.
I fought Gygas, but I didn't have the internet, so I didn't know how to beat him. Like I set my party up. I got there. I did all the RPG shit, right? Like, just keep your characters healed up. Just lay into him, and I fought him for 3 hours, and I'm not kidding. 3 straight hours, and he didn't die. And I'm like, I, he can't die. Like I might be a kid, but
Wise.
like this doesn't make any sense. My characters are maxed out. And it turns out it's pronounced ease, by the way.
Oh, is it?
Hmm
TIL. Ease.
I could talk about the original ease on Sega Master System all day, but I won't. Um, so it turns out when you fight Gygas, you have to use Paula's prayer ability over and over and over again, and it keeps like communicating with people outside that realm that you're in, and eventually it makes Gygas vulnerable and you can kill him. But if you didn't know that, you'd fight him for
Huh.
3 hours like a dumbass and not accomplish anything. And like as a boss, he has no physical form. He was horrifying. From a game that starts out with you fighting snarky crows and like bizarre cheeseburger eating gang members.
So actually, and that's actually, that something could be said, like just thinking about it now, I didn't realize playing it. That game in its entirety could be, and it probably is, a metaphor or allegory of growing up from an adolescent and like facing a fear and overcoming something like that. Because you're right, that boss was not, if you showed me like, intro 5 minutes of the game, last 5 minutes, I'd be like, no, these aren't the same game, because they're so very like, oh, we started out as kids fighting crows. Well, we're fighting like this world-ending, monstrous, he who shall not be named type of boss character. Like,
Alien deity from beyond the stars.
yeah.
Who might
You're
So,
also be your character.
right. So you could draw a
basically
lot of
fighting
like,
Cthulhu.
yeah, hit that snooze button, keep
If
the
if
cosmos safe for
if
another
Cthulhu
13
could
minutes.
somehow actually be more abstract,
Yeah.
like I'm trying to find some footage of the insane part of the fight. It just gets more and more nuts.
Yeah.
Here,
Like,
this
that's
is what you're
our
fighting, Brian. I'm gonna
yeah.
cover you again. This is
All
what you
right.
were fighting. Ah, for
Oh,
fuck's sake.
so friggin' weird.
Like I know I can't get the whole frame in there, but like,
That's the fight. Like, that's
but it
mm-mm.
phases too. So
Yeah.
look at it. And if you look, let me see. Let's see if I can get it.
It's like one of those magic eye posters.
If you looked at it here. Oh no, go back. Go back. Yes, yes, yes. Right here. This. Oh, yeah, I have my cursor hidden, but
Epilepsy check.
if you look at Paula's unit frame and look directly above, you can see a demon face in the black. But if you trace the black,
Oh yeah,
it's
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 uh,
it's a fetus.
it's the negative face. That is definitely like a
That's a
fetus's
baby.
head.
That's a baby's head.
Well, it's
Yeah,
a whole baby if you play it too. Watch.
yeah.
Like it's intended to be the whole thing.
Someone needs to make this into a movie. Just everyone walks out of their scratching their heads. Like, what the fuck was that?
And you fight that guy. Like, how do you beat that? You're fighting a concept. Look at that.
Oof.
Just I forgot
I
there was a
can't play that
character in
now.
it named Pooh.
I'll be like 6 beers in trying to fight Gigas and like, oh god, like can't watch that.
Yeah, what a nightmare. But like, there was nothing in the game to indicate that that was gonna happen.
Yeah.
It was like, oh yeah, well, now you gotta go fight Gygas, so we've gotta take your soul out and put your soul in these robots because human bodies can't survive in the realm we're gonna send you to. So we're gonna rip your soul out and jam it into robots. You're gonna go fight Gygas in a realm that only exists in quantum fuckery.
I don't
Like
want to play that again now. Like now that I'm
it's
Uh,
sitting down and
and you
actually
come
thinking about that game, like I think I'd get a lot more out of it playing it again as like an older person.
you come to that like whereas like at the beginning of the game, you stop a zombie invasion with fucking zombie-sized fly paper.
oh yeah,
Yep.
yeah,
It's just so whimsical and silly, and then you go to what's basically existential horror.
Exactly.
yeah.
Like
It's completely the
here's
game
the
takes this.
amorphic existence of adult life. Fight it. Like fuck.
Yeah, it's got Gygas is the alpha and omega, and it doesn't have a physical form. It's an idea.
Yeah.
Go beat him up. Your
Uh,
weapons are like you have a baseball bat, like
that's kind of
at
like
best.
in the original It. I know in the second one, the remake as well. I haven't seen them yet, but junior high, watched the TV movie, read the book, and like similar, because it's like kids having to fight this awful, terrible thing. But with the book, it's different because it goes away and it comes back years later. But like, yeah, kids fighting. Um, yeah, like I have a bat and like a slingshot. Here's the concept of like existential dread. Go fight it. How do we do that? Like,
Apparently, you spend 3 hours beating on it for no
right?
reason until you eventually run out of consumables and die.
Um, do you want to shoot the shit for a few about like what we want to do with the channel?
Go
Like,
for it. Go for it.
um,
For small
the
tangent
yeah,
first, before the same thing happened to me with Lunar Silver Star Story on the PlayStation. I never beat the last boss. I got to him and I would just fight him for literally hours until I ran out of consumables and would just die, and I had no idea what I was doing wrong. And I still to this day have never beaten that game. Anyway, channel.
Take it away.
um, yeah. So like, I guess I don't know. We like talking about games that we enjoy, and have enjoyed. Nostalgia is a big thing. So partially that we can relive it, and also so there's like, you know, other people can live it vicariously if they weren't there. And like how video games have evolved and things like that. Because we were there, you know, I think probably a lot of people in this channel were there. Um,
Some people weren't.
some people weren't, but like, I mean, we'd like to bring more gameplay. We're toying around an idea of like a 3 piece session. It could be a Saturday or a Wednesday thing where we take 30 minutes each of us and we each play a game, and just talk about it. The other two people can, mock them relentlessly for like,
Like this.
you died to a pack of goblins, like you suck, kind of thing. Um, so that, that kind of thing, bring some actual gameplay, and just kind of, you know, talk fondly of like whatever game we happen to be playing, because like I plan to play things that are like nostalgic to me and that I really enjoyed, or really really hated but really enjoyed. I loved to hate Heroes of Might and Magic 3. Love to hate that game. I love that game to my heart, in my dear, like deepest heart,
It's
because
a
that was an
dirty,
important, it was an
cheating
important
whore
game. But that game is a dirty cheating whore. Fuck that game.
from Whore
um
Island.
from Whore Island.
So to kind of build on what Brian said, we've been having fun, and not only doing this. I mean, we're only talking to about 9 people by LBS's count, and we appreciate every single one of you, um, whether I know who you are or not. Um, it doesn't matter. Everybody who's taken their time out to spend it with us, it's amazing. It just makes it feel even cooler. Like, we would do this. We've said this before. It's kind of our thing. We would do what we're doing right now for nobody. No audience at all. We stayed up last night talking about old stories and video games and stuff till 3 in the morning. Just those conversations are gonna take place. We call it diner. It's basically diner talk. These are diner talks. This is stuff we would talk about. And the only reason we can't open it up to more people regularly is just because it would be chaos. Like, we would talk over each other. Nobody would ever get to say what they wanted to say. It's just we need to keep it a little bit formatted, like a little bit clean. So moving forward, Lord Hart's a dick. Um, he's also a gangster. But uh, Saturdays are going to be for this. It's like
Yeah,
podcast format. We're going to talk about a topic. We're going to get, just talk with you guys on stream and hang out. And like, as soon as I'm done babbling here, if Steve has nothing to add, we're going to get into our honorable mention list, which is just going to be a free for all. Um,
another thing that like engaging you guys, whether it's 18 or 80, finding a way to like engage the chat room. Half of you we know, probably more than half of you we know, but like a neat way to engage the chat room. I don't know. I don't know. Is that a thing with streaming? I know they talk
it
about chat
depends.
rooms and stuff, but
They
like,
it depends on the streamer. Some
yeah.
streamers, once you're Shroud and you're playing New World with 80,000 people watching you, what he'll do is set stream chat to like subscribers only or something like that. Because with
Yeah.
that many people, or watch Asmongold stream, just he can't
Yeah.
possibly see any of it. And well, there are drops, but yeah, like, so it's a different relationship. But if even if we had something like 100 people watching,
Yeah.
I keep an eye on it, and if somebody has something that I can answer or address in a way that doesn't completely derail the conversation, then I'm happy to do it.
Mhm.
Like, at the, I won't get into it right now, but I think the streamer viewer relationship is kind of unusual and it's a little bit uncomfortable for me. Uh, Happy to talk about that another time, but it would depend. If we made it a focus to try and engage with chat, then yeah, you could do it.
We
You
could
can
get
certainly.
wicked retro and do some stuff that I used to do with like school friends. We could fire up the original XCOM and name soldiers after people in the chat, and like even like Beagle Rush with like XCOM 2. He did this with his subscribers on like the new XCOM, and I think it was Beagle. Anyways, it was wicked cool. Um, we're also degenerates. We are.
Watch people get 95% and die.
Yeah.
I don't even want to talk
Like
about
I expect from the
the people
original
who are gonna ruin
XCOM,
it.
I expect that from the original XCOM. That was a savage game. That was brutal.
Yeah, the dice was weighted a certain way, I think, to be a dick. But and then on Wednesdays we're gonna do like Brian's talking about. We're gonna try and grab a game that we can legally stream. There are some caveats to that. We're gonna try and grab a game we can legally stream. Either we'll all play it, or each of us will get our half hour while getting relentlessly mocked by both the other two guys and everybody in chat for their ineptitude or whatever. Um, so that's Wednesdays, and we'll be better at it. We're just gonna get better. We're gonna get more streamlined. Things are gonna improve the longer you guys stick with us.
just to touch very briefly on the legalities of the asshole riding down Route 74 on a very loud motorcycle. Touch on the legalities of streaming retro stuff. You're not, or you can't stream. You actually can't even use a ROM unless you own a working console and cartridge, because it's considered an electronic backup. So while yeah, we can easily go out and get ROMs, we can't stream those. Although stuff like we just got a bundle on Steam. There's like Sega Genesis. It's like we got it like 60 games for like $58. Those are, as far as I can tell, they're prepackaged from everything I've read. It's prepackaged standalone, so we would be allowed to stream those. We might not. Got to look into it a bit more. Um, but there's some due diligence we have to put in, and like a lot of modern games are very streamer friendly. They have like audio settings where you can just turn off any copyrighted music or whatnot that they may have licensed. But for old content, I don't know, because there's fair use when you play a game to give criticism or express thoughts. But then you also get into the territory of here's a published work, intellectual property rights get involved, and we're now using that to make, to make content. So I know there's limits to it, and we have to really figure that out, which we're doing.
There's also the, I'm not sure the right word, political landscape of between a lot of companies that are very overzealous, and like
Yes,
I've seen stories and read articles about people doing let's plays and getting takedown notices for
that was
games
big a couple years back. Yeah.
that they were the sole developer and owner of,
Mhm.
and they were streaming their own game, and YouTube was sending them cease and desist notices, quote unquote, from the developer. He's like, I didn't send you that. Why are you banning me? I'm like, well, the developer sent us. No, I didn't.
No,
You know?
no, unless so if we owned a classic console and cart, yes, we could stream off that or use a ROM or other legal electronic backup of the game to stream off of. Unless we own those consoles, and pretty much all of those were thrown out as useless toys. Um,
I'll have
you'll
some
never
of
need
them,
these again.
but they're in
I have a
storage.
couple
I'm
of
not.
carts kicking around, but the preload stuff, I don't know. Nintendo is pretty tight with their intellectual property. I don't think like they're up there
Nintendo
with like LucasArts and Games Workshop.
Nintendo re-released the NES and the Super Nintendo
Yeah.
as consoles with a large number of games preloaded on the hardware and no ability to put a cartridge in.
Yeah. So you get what
Uh,
you get, but
so you
we'll
get
look
like
into
the
it.
30, yeah. And like the Super Nintendo Classic had Star Fox 2, which was never re-released,
Right.
which was never released in the United States. It was actually a brand new game,
Uh,
technically.
but yeah, for anyone watching live or watching this later, uh, we want to bring you neat content with our thoughts on stuff and how, you know, how it
We're
affected us, how it made us make us who we are, kind of thing.
we're open for suggestions too,
Yes, that
obviously,
too.
especially criticism. Let us know what we suck at. We're just trying to get better. None of us have ever done this shit before,
Hmm.
and it's a little alien. Like I've never talked to uh, camera before. Hmm? Okay, all right. That's the boring stuff away. I have a list here of games.
Yes, honorable
I'm
mentions.
just gonna interrupt. Okay, I'm gonna say one. People are gonna be talking about it, and an arbitrary amount of time will go by, and I'm gonna just shout the name of the next game on the list.
Like
We're just
extra
gonna
time in
like
soccer.
lightning
We don't
round
know how
shit.
much time is left. We just know that it's ticking away. I love that about soccer, by the way. I wish more sports did that. If you get penalties, they add extra time to the end of the game, like extra innings, but nobody aside from the refs and the timekeeper know how much time is added. So the players just play for however long after the game ends, and then the whistle blows, and that's it. It's a pretty neat concept. Anyways,
Super Street Fighter 2. To me, it was the king. It was the king of fighting games on the console. It, Mortal Kombat was cool. Clay Fighter, excuse me, Clay Fighter is also on the list. That was fucking cool for its own reasons. There were a lot of cool beat 'em ups and fighters. Street Fighter 2. Super Street Fighter 2 in particular had the best mechanics, the most complicated play. Like, it requires some
Crisp,
finesse.
crisp controls.
I mean, we can certainly agree to just disagree on that, but like, mad respect to Mortal Kombat. It's just, plus I had a
This
personal
spider
story
was
that I was like,
destined slot.
I think I was 12, and there was an arcade in Bristol called Scooters, and I practiced so much Street Fighter 2 at home that I was able to run the machine without paying for it for just over an hour before my parents made me leave. Uh, and I'm beating up. I'm just sending grown men home, just like absolutely beating the shit out of them. Nobody, I was unstoppable. I went home that day. Oh my god, I felt like a rock star at the ripe old age of 12. I wanted all the girls to notice, except for the fact that I probably still thought they had cooties. Uh, so that was my big Street Fighter thing, and I played the shit out of it too. So, but MK was dope. I was infatuated with the violence, but and Clay
Hmm.
Fighter's on our list here too, somewhere else. But Brian was waxing poetic about it earlier.
It was cool. It was. I guess they had originally. I did a little bit of reading on it beforehand to kind of confirm a few things or answer some unanswereds that I have. And I guess it was um the animation style was very new. It was also like a non-blood and guts fighter. It didn't use people. It used blocks of clay shaped into various things. So like it made fighters more accessible. Because video game violence has always been a thing, even going back to fucking Pong and Atari. It's like it's gonna rot your brain, it's gonna turn you into a killer. No. Um, so but it toned it down. Um, and I guess it kind of pushed it into more households, or it was just more I hated the Elvis guy. I hated the Elvis guy. I could not stand the way he looked. It was awful. Awful.
Okay, moving on. Deleted those. Deleted those. We have a game called
The taffy bastard.
Aladdin. I don't know. Is that a new property?
No,
Ah,
that's Aladdin,
like the Disney movie.
like the Disney movie Aladdin.
Come on, man. I'm just fucking with you. Uh,
Most, pretty much everything licensed was crap, except for like I mentioned, Aladdin and the Lion King game was good. It's just insanely difficult. But Aladdin set, hit the niche just right of being fun and lighthearted, mildly challenging without being punishing.
You
I
gotta be
have a lot
careful.
of
Who knows? That's another
I,
IP monger is the
yeah,
mouse. So like they're like, you
yeah,
can't cease and desist. You're talking shit about a video game. Like Rescue Rangers was NES. It's a very good game.
yeah. Same with Ducktales. Ducktales was great,
I had
but
DuckTales on the
Nintendo games.
Genesis, and I remember very clearly it was a game where your weapon was a gun that fired plungers, and you would get different plungers that could stick to different stuff. Like, so partway through the game, you'd get a plunger that could stick to animals and creatures, so you'd use that to shoot a bird and then ride across a cliff. Like,
You
hold
sure
on the
that wasn't?
plunger.
You sure that wasn't Darkwing Duck?
Positive.
I think that was Darkwing Duck.
Okay,
Might have been.
it sounds
Uh,
like Darkwing Duck, which
No.
was a
I'll find it while
Ducktales
you guys are
spinoff.
chatting.
Yeah, the SNES game or the NES game was very different. You beat people up with Scrooge McDuck's cane.
could bounce on people with it.
Hmm.
Give us another honorable mention, sir.
Oh yeah, the game was called Quackshot. It was Donald Duck as like Indiana Jones character.
Ah,
It was
Backshot.
super good. If you get a chance to play that on a ROM, give it a
Backshot.
couple hours of your time. Uh,
What a pun. Not even a pun. Shot.
F-Zero and Mario Kart we talked about a bit.
Talk about.
Really not much to add there. We didn't include any sports games because most of us here, surprise, surprise, are not big sports guys. However, that doesn't mean I didn't have a nominee for the top 10.
I played my sports games on NES and Sega Genesis. I had like Joe Montana's football, the one that talked. Um, and then I like NES was a bunch of sports games. I didn't really touch them on regular Super NES.
And so for that, I had nominated NBA Jam Tournament Edition. I loved that game. It was just so much fun because it wasn't basketball. Like it wasn't basketball. It was give me the ball and then you beat the shit out of the other team because you're not going to get fouled. So you just take the ball and then dunk from like the half court line. Like who gives a shit? Physics need not apply. And like just the windmill dunks and shit. Like, oh look at that, Muggsy Bogues just jumped 75 feet in the air and then missed the dunk somehow, and you're just like, I mean, to be fair, dunking from 75 feet is probably pretty challenging. You got to get your angles right. Uh, but no, it was just so absurd. You could play as like fucking Richard Nixon and shit. I think it was like there were
Right.
celebrities you could play as. Like you could play as Bill Clinton, and you could be Hillary too. So you could be like what was at the time the president and first lady. You could just be them on your two on
I don't
two
know.
team.
Has that ever been done in a video game before, where like they use like a head of state, like actual likeness?
No,
I'd like to read into the intellectual property laws around that, or like the history of that. I'll read about that some other time. That's
but
pretty
the
interesting.
game was super fun, and even if you played it straight and narrow and just wanted to build up your team, it was so much fun. Let me see. Let me see something else. The Secret of Mana and Secret of Evermore both got mentions here. Secret of Mana would have been in my top 10 if it was my top 10 and not a collective. Uh, just just uh, such a great selection,
That was another game I never played, but would watch my buddy play it all the.
dude. I had like
It
a
was
romantic fascination with that game as a kid. It was just such a big deal, and then Evermore came out, and it played very similarly, but the feel
didn't
was very different.
it didn't have the same magic. I still
No, it
remember
didn't. It
wandering
felt like
around.
sci-fi.
I still remember wandering around Secret of Mana in town just to listen to the music.
Well, no, you can't do it now. I promise. I tried recently. That music will give you heart disease.
Heart
It's
disease.
too sweet.
Tweet the CDC on that one.
I'm
Well, this
I'm sure
game
I
has
could
heart
listen to
disease.
like an orchestral or like modern covers of those
Yeah.
songs, but
Yes.
not the MIDI versions.
I had mentioned Super Bomberman 2 on my list. The other guys haven't played it, so that didn't.
I'm obviously missing out, so I got to go check that one out.
Yeah,
I'm definitely.
Yeah, I avoided all Hudson Soft games after my Adventure Island fiasco, which we mentioned
Bomberman was
last
was
week.
a Bomberman was its own thing. Like it
Was
was
it
just
Hudson
either
Soft though?
It was the same developer, but
Yeah.
Super
yeah.
Mario RPG also got honorable mention because that game was like. So you mean you're telling me they're making a Mario game that has Mario in it, and then you're playing as like other shitty characters like Bowser and stuff like that, and they're the good guys, and it has like real role playing game mechanics, and that doesn't make
And
any sense. And then you play it, and it's incredible.
I was just disappointed you couldn't play Toad.
But it was
That's
an
unfortunate.
excellent RPG. Seriously, just if you're talking pure RPGs, it makes the top five. I don't think there's a question about that.
Absolutely not.
So let's see, our list is down to a whopping 8. I wanted to do a quick shout out to Mario Paint, which wasn't really a game so much as an experience. I did the
Yeah, it was
Mona
just.
Lisa on Mario Paint by following the strategy guide I got. Yeah, for Mario Paint. And it took me all day where you would make these stamps because you would just create stamps that were just you fill in each pixel with a color. And I followed the guide and stamped it in place. And it took me all day. It might have taken me 2 days. And then I just had it. I just had it on my screen. I'm like, look what I colored by numbered. And and it's like, well, you gotta shut your NES off now or your console off. It's time for bed. Shit. So like no, you could make music. It had a silly little fly game, or you were a fly swatter and you would just slap the shit out of flies, and it was just like, why are we doing this? Because it's fun. Everything about Mario Paint was interesting. It was an interesting experience, and I'm glad I had it. Oh, and it had a mouse.
Yep. And the big plastic mouse pad.
It was
Yep.
it was very plastic.
There was the
Very-
music building where Mario would bounce on the notes and run through it like it was a
Yeah.
level.
And there's still like that, like I would mention pre-show, like I think they re-released that recently on Switch or like a new version of it or something. I remember hearing about it, like a new version of like Mario. Oh, maybe it's Mario Maker that I'm thinking of. But like to me, that showed that video games you could create neat things with video games. It wasn't just about playing. You could play and create. And you're like, look at this! I made this song. I made this. I made the Mona Lisa. Do I get rich tomorrow? Can we hang this up in the Louvre? Like,
I mean, your parents will probably hang it up in the bathroom.
right?
Right under the toilet seat. Okay, we got a couple more. I just split them into categories so we can kind of bang through them. We usually look to have these done in about an hour and a half. We're coming up on that mark. Um, there were some platformers that we talked about pre-show that were very enjoyable, but it just didn't on their own. A platformer is not going to make the top 10. It just doesn't have the depth. It can be super fun.
Not for us, anyways.
Right. It can be
Uh,
super fun, super good, super well made, but it just lacks depth for me, I guess.
uh, Platformers really haven't held up as a genre pretty strongly over the years either, and we kind of went for longevity and influence.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, that's why Earthbound made the top of our list, because as we're discussing it pre-stream, Steve mentions what was the game, Steve?
Undertale,
Undertale.
basically a spiritual successor to Earthbound, made a few years ago. Massive internet sensation, incredibly
That's
viral. Game made by a single
yes.
dude
Yeah.
and like a handful
That's
of
the
like
legacy that
contractors.
Earthbound has left.
And I can't even talk about Undertale without spoiling it. It's a unique experience that I highly recommend that everybody go out and play. It's not particularly long, maybe 15, 20 hours if you go slow.
To get back to topic, sorry, that was a little tangent there.
Super 3D Noah's Ark.
Pass on that. The three platformers that made it into our discussion were the Super Star Wars Trilogy, which
Hard.
kind of counted as one game. They were
They
hard,
looked
but they
great.
looked really good, and they
They
played really
played good.
smoothly, and they were true to the movie's plot for the most part, and it felt great. Like just good games to play.
They were, but that was a legit mad difficult trilogy. Like those were some hard games to beat.
They had some flight elements at the end too,
Yes.
and they were that's where it's like, oh, you're pretty good at platforming. Are you pretty good at shit with
You're
random
like,
rules?
no. You're like,
Are
this is not why I bought this game. I suck now. But
are you
The
pretty good at shit we just made up?
The vector graphics Star Wars arcade cabinet that you sat in, that ate so much money of mine as a kid. I would fly that thing so I just I had the cool like control yoke, and like I love the vector graphics. They were beautiful.
The other two we had on the list for that genre was Donkey Kong Country because it's an excellent. I mean, it's just if you took platforming in the 16-bit era, took all the best of it, and put it in one game, it's DK Country. It had the best
Yep.
graphics. It had
It
excellent
spawned a
mechanics, fun
franchise.
boss
Like,
fights.
yeah,
And Mega
T2.
Man X too. We had Mega Man X on there. I mean,
Yep.
but Mega Man X is another game that where it's like they're not reinventing anything. They're like we're gonna make Mega Man, but we're gonna make it 16-bit. And it's gonna be more gooder, and it is. I mean, it really is. That's an excellent game. It has secret shit you can find like suit upgrades and stuff. Great game. It's like you could bake me the world's greatest white bread. I'm still not giving it any awards. Like, is it good? Yes, it's excellent white bread. It's the best white bread I've ever had.
Is it?
But it's fucking white bread.
Yep.
Next thing you know, it's gonna come out that I'm racist against white bread. Um, Pilot Wings is on the list. Pilot
Pilot
Wings was
Wings.
a very unique experience. I didn't play it. Brian did.
I did big flight sim, big aviation fan in general. And when that came out, like I could fly a biplane, you could do skydiving, you got like a little rocket belt, which is very different from a jetpack. You got a little rocket belt. There was a lot of fun flying in that. I dug it. Oh, that was such a good game. Again, personal preference. Um, and then as we're looking at Mike's chair, I know another game on the list. Oh, I thought you got up.
Oh no,
Uh,
no, no! I turned around and pet the dog.
from last week's stream, there was a game I could not think of. And I don't even know if it's on the honorable mention list, but I came across it while I was coming up with my list. It's called UN Squadron. It's like Gradius. It's a side scroller aircraft shooter. But the aircraft were fairly accurate, somewhat as accurate as they needed to be. But like you could fly an A7 Corsair, an F-16, an A-10. Like you could, and they performed according to their roles. Like the A-10, I think, had like a strafing cannon. Um, the Corsair was just an all-around good air vehicle, things like that. I loved the hell out of that game.
Yeah. It wasn't on the list, but I definitely wanted to put it on the list. I forgot. I had nominated Wolfenstein 3D because I think it begun to bring first-person shooters to the market, the home console market. The problem is it was I I've gone back and played it, and I've gone back and played an emulated version from the SNES. It sucks. Like, I'm not even trying to be a hater. It was revolutionary, but it is not a good time. It's the fish eyiness of it with the enemies are all the same. The levels are all basically the same. You can't pan up or down, and which you actually couldn't do in the original Doom either. But
Yeah.
it's just you can appreciate its contribution to gaming without thinking it was a great game.
It was decent on PC, and the port was horrible.
Bad port.
And it hasn't aged well.
Uh,
Except killing Nazis. Killing Nazis always ages well.
in
Nice.
video games.
Nice.
I had Battle Clash on the list, and the Battle Clash is going to be kind of suspect for some folks. I'm not sure how many people who would even consider watching this or who are here now have ever played SNES games with the Super Scope, which was their friggin' rocket launcher, their like light gun that was also a bazooka. It was awesome. You look through the scope, you had two different buttons for different weapons. You could charge the thing, like charge up and fire a big one, and there was Battle Clash was basically you were in a robot mech thing, and your opponent was too, and each one had a different way to fight him, different weak points. You'd shoot his incoming missiles to prevent being hit, and you would just unload damage at the right times in the right locations, and it had really cool backgrounds like I think it was like parallax movement, so that stuff in the back was moving faster or slower, and the closer stuff was faster, because your opponent would try to duck you, he'd go right off screen, and then the camera, since it was supposed to be what you're seeing, would catch up to him, and it was really engaging. Like they did a great
Yeah.
job for something that's just, I mean, it's
A side scroller, like shoot at the screen.
yeah, no,
Like,
it was really
what can you
engaging.
do? You could do that or duck hunt. Like,
Yeah, Duck Hunt was a hard pass. I don't think I ever
Imagine
played
if
it.
it's
like when me and my friends figured out that you could plug the controller in a port 2 for duck hunt and control the ducks, dude, we used to fuck with each other so bad. It was amazing because
it
like
was
we found out but kept it secret from one another. So like somebody would always like slide the controller away, and you're playing in a dark room, so you don't know that. Like, damn, this fucking duck. Like, great.
I used to fuck with my cousins like that all the time. They didn't know. honorable mention that made my list that I didn't even bother bringing up when we got to our actual deliberation was an obscure RPG called Robo Trek, which I bought by accident, thinking it was a Robotech like anime role
Yeah,
playing game.
nice.
It was
Robo
not.
Trek.
It was not. It was nonetheless a great game. If it was
Hey, that
very
actually
clearly
looks pretty.
aimed. It was aimed at a younger audience. It was very much aimed at like 10 to 12-year-olds.
It was from
It was
Enix.
very silly. It was very silly. But it was unique in that you didn't play a hero or a wizard or anybody with any sort of combat potential. You played an engineer and you built a robot who would go into battle for you, and you would build all the different parts for it to create it and upgrade it and outfit it with different weapons. And
I might actually.
it was very customizable. Almost everything in the game you made by combining different items and stuff, and very little you bought in shops. You just gathered different materials to make shit. And there was like a big poster inlet that came with it that folded out. That was like the size
Damn.
of half a wall. There was just a chart of everything you could build, and all your
I will.
problems were solved that way. And it was very like it was whimsical and childish, but super fun and interesting just because it was unique. Just
I love that kind
solve
of stuff. Like, I'll
yeah.
check that game out now. Like it's a great
It
RPG.
had a grid base. It was turn based like side combat, but instead of uh you standing on the right and the enemies all being on the left, there was a grid and you had to move around and avoid
Hmm.
attacks or have like your own attacks had area of effects too based on that, and like swords were more powerful than ranged weapons, but were melee only. You had to get close the distance, and there was a lot of neat different builds you could do.
The last genre that I have in our honorable mention list here are the side-scrolling Streets of Rage style beat 'em ups, and there are two. We had TMNT Turtles in Time, which was superb.
Quality.
Just I mean, you're not gonna get good cinema out of it. It's not Final Fantasy VI.
You're not gonna get cinema like TMNT Secret of the Ooze.
Yeah, you're
It's
not gonna get any great cinema like Turtles in Time the movie.
you're not gonna
Uh,
get Kevin Nash as Super Shredder. Like, or was that
so,
Scott Hall? It was one of the two.
so, but you would get an excellent game that's fun to just log into it with your buddies, pick your favorite turtle, because if you're 34 or older, you have a favorite Ninja Turtle, obviously.
It's Donatello.
It's Leonardo.
Mine's Donatello because he's the scientist.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like the
Also,
guy with swords and not a stick.
also,
Also,
it was because he had a stick, and I had used that. I learned how to use that in martial arts class, so he used the weapon that I used.
Would you have chosen Katana class instead?
If that was an option, I probably would
if
have
they're gonna
chosen
give those
katana
to like
class,
10-year-old kids,
but
you
they
go
didn't
oh,
offer
fucking
katana
katana.
classes to 8-year-olds.
So Turtles in Time was a great game,
Mhm.
and the other one in that category that we talked about was Knights of the Round, and I think Knights of the Round started life as an arcade game, where you would just it was a quarter muncher. You just go in and just eat your money because you're gonna get your ass kicked in like 14 milliseconds. But you would play as Arthur, Lancelot, or Percival. Apparently Percival was fucking swole. You remember that
Very
guy, dude? He was just like he strapped like pauldron on one arm, all armored up, and the other one was just Trogdor with an axe. Uh,
massive axe, like
oh,
huge.
just like this is a one-handed axe. Like, oh, that's actually the size of like a
But like
wrecking ball from a crane. Like, yeah, it's a one-handed axe.
yeah, like and it didn't even have like a long haft on it like a battle axe would. It's like short. It's like probably like a couple of feet, like maybe not even. It was like one of those mini baseball bats you used to be able to
It's the
buy. That's how
worst
long the
axe.
handle was. It's like, wait, what? No.
But like it was cool because just like the D&D arcade games, as you played through, you'd level up. And what was cool for a 16-bit at the time was that you would level up and your character would get bigger weapons, and for some reason your shit would turn more gold, just because golder is better. More golder, the better. and like your costume would get more ornate. The armor would just go more and more anime, because that's what I think of when I think of King Arthur stories.
Anime Arthur.
I definitely think about ooh-wooing.
Morgan Le Fay.
Oh, what a bitch.
I want to ooh Morgan Le Fay.
But yeah, those are some of the best beat 'em up games on the console.
Yeah.
And they didn't make the cut for the same reason the platformers didn't. It's like, this is good fun for an afternoon, and then you're kind of done with it.
Those are our brain leavings on games that were important to us from the Super Nintendo. Me personally, I had a much bigger Sega Genesis collection. So if that topic ever rolls around, I'll have a
Potentially
lot
next
more
week.
potentially next week. I have some legit like hardcore favorites from the Genesis. Some also hardcore friggin' stinkers. One of them was actually in the Steam bundle we bought, Eternal Champions. That game is terrible, but they put
You
it in
should
the
play it
bag.
on Wednesday.
Maybe I will.
Just show everybody how awesome it is.
Oh, how terrible I am. I hated that. Maybe it's because I wasn't good at it. I don't know. Like I got frustrated. It had a really cool cast of characters though.
I think that about does it. Unless you got something to add, Steve.
No, I think we're good.
Well, as always,
We're about
we
time.
Thank you for joining us for our
Yeah.
like 90 minutes and change. We'll see you Wednesday with something. We'll post in the usual places. Can we just make like a post here? Like, is
There's
that
a
an
schedule.
option?
There's a schedule section.
There's a schedule and everything. Okay. This is my really like I've used Twitch more in the past 3 weeks than I have my entire life.
Yeah,
and I
same.
And
can update
I
the
was
schedule.
alive. I was alive when it was created.
I can update the schedule, but it's going to be pretty set for now, unless we
Yeah.
post otherwise. It's 8 o'clock Wednesdays and Saturdays.
Yep.
We're probably
Saturday
going to
show
look at
runs a
exploring
little.
other options. Like sometimes there might be like, oh, Steve wants to play an old ass RPG or something he bought on Steam, and he's going to share that with you and talk about it during. And if he wants to do that on a given day, there's no reason for him not to. So, and
That would be great.
being an
Stuff
example.
like that.
Just,
Yeah.
we'll keep the material coming. We're gonna keep working on it. Feedback is, at this stage especially, is super important. Also, telling your friends, super important. We don't care so much about the money, but uh, it's the idea of sharing this with a larger audience is just,
Be great.
it's it's the for me it's the counter to the fact that my parents said that this would never lead anywhere. Video gaming was a flash in the pan, and that I had wasted my childhood. So I think a lot of value comes from gaming, and what we each take from it is different, and that's fine, and that's what makes it special. And the ability to share that with more and more people, it just makes me happy on a personal level. But I'm not going to
So
be sentimental all the time, because fuck that.
until Wednesday, hold in that reset button when you power off. That doesn't work well on your PC, by the way. It actually wants to be shut down like properly.
Hold the reset button.
That's
Don't.
terrible. Let's not use that. Hey, Pooch, you want to come up on camera, doggo? No,
Oh,
your
you
ears went
like? Oh,
back.
let me plug this real quick.
Come here. No, no camera for me. Oh gosh, all the dogs come in. Hi, Penny.
He's not open. My friend Gary Ellis has a meadery in the
No
works.
shit.
I don't know I don't know what's happening with the legalities. There's so much that goes into opening a place that sells booze, and he's been working on it for a while. So um, you can sometimes catch him at Ren fairs and stuff, and he's got a booth or something. And keep your eyes out. But yeah, I think that does it for us.
Thank you for joining us again. Like we appreciate you guys, whether we know you in real life or we don't. I think I said we probably know 3/4 of you guys in chat just from gaming. But like, thank
Yeah.
you for joining us. Yeah, it was good. Always is.
Yeah, there are people we know, people we don't, people we probably know but don't recognize your usernames.
or people we want to know.
I
All
think
of that.
everyone fits into that category.
Be easy.
We'll let Mikey take it out and outro us.
I don't have anything today.
Okay, so we're all good. We'll catch you guys Wednesday.
Get fucked, San Diego.